Welcome to April in Canada. Yes, it does look like that out there right now, but thankfully it looks like this in here. Welcome to the Jayda InStitches show. Welcome to the April Unblanket. All of the appliques you see on this month's Unblanket are linked in the description box down below. We have videos for all of them already. Today, I'm going to walk you through a little graph work. I really wanted to put a fence in my April Unblanket. I was picturing the Easter Bunny out on the front lawn, sort of beyond the fence, and rather than making a fence applique, realized it was easier to just stitch one into the canvas. So that's what I did. This is some very light graph work. If you're new to graph work or changing colors on the fly, this is probably a really good project to dip your fingers in, or I suppose your toes. Of course, we really don't crochet with our toes, do we? All right, dip your fingers in. And we're going to focus on this part of the actual graph today. If you'd like a copy of the entire graph pattern plus the written instructions for the canvas, we'll have that in the Etsy shop, link in the description. And that pattern also includes the little Easter egg applique, the basic Easter egg applique as well, just for fun. The written instructions for all of the other applique patterns are also available separately in the Etsy shop, although I think a few of them are available on the website as well. We'll make notes about that in the description box as well. Today, a little bit of graph work. I'm going to show you a layout, stitch down of most of my appliques. That's what's on the table, so let's grab our hooks, grab our yarn, we'll head on over to the craft table, and we'll stitch up the April Unblanket together. For the April Unblanket canvas, in addition to whatever appliques you may want to put on it, and we've got links to all of these pretty little appliques in the description box down below, I'm going to show you today how to do a little bit of basic graph work. If you're new to graph work, this will be handy and fun because it's a mirror image graph. There's very little color changing, but I thought maybe it would be a good idea to demonstrate a little bit of color changing if you want to try this for yourself. Pair of scissors, yarn needle. I'm using my 5.5mm hook, also known as the I or the 9. Same hook as I've used for the previous Unblanket canvases. And some colors. I've got some green. This is my color A. I've got around 45 yards of a size 4 medium weight acrylic in green. Color B for blue, that's my sky, around 64 yards of the blue. We're going to actually take a few shorter lengths of this, 2 short lengths to use for a little bit of simple color or simplified color changing. I'll explain that when we get there. A bit of brown, 10 yards of brown, my color C. This is going to be my fence posts. And the border, around 22 yards for the border. I'm going to use this fun fiesta colored, multicolored yarn for the border. It reminds me of jelly beans, and I think that's just perfect for April. And once you've got all that together, we can get started. The April canvas is built the same way as the other canvases in this project. It is 36 stitches across by 24 rows high. And we begin the same way. I'm going to start at the bottom with green for my grass. I'm going to begin with a slip knot and chain 37. Once you have 37 chains, you're going to skip to the 3rd chain from the hook, double crochet into that 3rd chain. The chain 2 that you skipped counts as a double crochet. So remember that when you come all the way back across, you're going to double crochet in every single chain all the way across, including that chain 2 at the beginning. You'll have 36 stitches at the end of row 1. At the end of every row, you're going to chain 2 and turn. Remember, the chain 2 counts as a double crochet. Because the chain 2 counts, that means that this stitch right here, the first stitch of the row, is already accounted for. That chain 2 is using it. You are going to double crochet in the next stitch and in each stitch all the way across, including the top of the chain 2. You're going to repeat this. Double crochet in every single stitch all the way across, double crochet in the top of the chain 2, and turn. Repeat that until the end of row 10. So you'll have 10 solid rows of color A, or this green color, and I'll catch up with you at the end of row 10. At the end of row 10, you're done with your green yarn. You can fasten off. You don't need very much yarn. And you can either weave in your tail or work over top of it a little bit later. Now we're going to get right into some graph work. I'm going to show you the little chunk of the graph that we're talking about right up here. It's a mirror image graph. Basically, there are 2 rows that we repeat fully once, and then one of them we repeat again, and you can see which one I'm talking about. And what you're going to want is a length of blue yarn cut for each of those rows where you see the blue in between the brown. So about 5 yards of a length of blue and another 5 yards of a length of blue. And that's just so you don't have to be carrying yarn up the edge. You can weave your tails in later. It's not that big a deal. So I recommend cutting yourself a length of blue yarn that's about 5 yards. Do that twice. Grab your brown yarn and we'll start working on our fence. We're going to begin by taking our brown yarn, or color C, making a slip knot. We're going to flip our work. We're going to join our yarn in the top of what was the last stitch of row 10. I'm going to join right over top of that tail so I can work over top of it. But if you find it easier, you can always weave it in later. Chain 2 to begin. Chain 2 counts as double crochet, and we're going to double crochet into the next stitch. But before we complete that double crochet, we're actually going to engage our blue yarn as well. So you're going to pick up a loop and work the first half of that double crochet. You'll have 2 loops left on your hook. You haven't finished that double crochet, and there's a reason for that. We want to bring in our blue yarn now. We're going to just give yourself a nice sort of bit of tail that you can weave it in. You're not even bothering with a knot. You don't have to. You're going to finish off that double crochet with your blue yarn. So you've got a complete double crochet now. It's got the brown yarn at the top, but now we're using blue, and that's set us up to start working with the proper color in the next stitch. So you're going to double crochet into the very next stitch, which is this one right here, but you're also taking care to work over top of your brown yarn. You are carrying the brown yarn. So you can get that first stitch in there. You can tighten up your previous stitches and just give everything a little bit of a tug. I'm going to get that tail out of the way. There we go. So that's a little neater. So there's my chain 2 that began. There's the top of that second stitch right there. It's in brown. And there's my first stitch in blue. We're going to do 8 more double crochets in blue, or B color, working over top of the brown yarn. Of course, I'm also stitching over top of my short tails, the green yarn. You can leave your short tails out and weave them in later if you find that easier. But it's important to make sure you're working over top of the brown yarn that you're carrying. You're carrying the actual brown yarn so that you can use it again in a moment. When you get to that last stitch, or the 8th stitch, you'll have your first plus 7. You're getting to that 8th stitch. It's going to be 9 stitches in total in blue. You're going to start that stitch in blue, but we're changing back to brown. We're changing back to our C color. So you're going to work the first half of that last stitch in blue. That's stitch number 9 in blue. Drop your blue, pick up your brown. It's going to be right where you need it to be. If you need to, you can sort of pull on it a little bit just to make sure that it hasn't like bulged out underneath any of your other stitches. Don't want to drop that loop. Come here, you. You're going to pick up the brown. You're going to finish that double crochet with the brown yarn. You can tug on your blue. And now that completes your 9th stitch. You'll have 9 double crochet in blue. The last stitch has blue at the top, but you've now changed back to brown. You're going to work 2 double crochet in brown, or C color. You're going to work over top of your blue, so you're carrying blue. 1 full in blue, or I should say in brown, and then start the next one in brown, but because it's the stitch before a color change, drop your brown yarn, pick up your blue, finish that stitch in blue. And now you can see that we've got a little simple repeating pattern here. 2 in color C, which is brown, 9 in color blue, which is B, and 2 more in C, or brown color. You're going to do 10 double crochet now in blue, or color B. You're working over top of that brown yarn. You're carrying your brown yarn. 10 full, or I should say 9 full double crochet in blue. You're going to start the 10th double crochet in blue, but you're going to finish it with brown. You start that 10th stitch in blue, drop your blue, front or back, doesn't matter. Pick up your brown, your sea color, the color that is your fence post. Finish off that stitch with the brown. You can always tighten it up a little bit in a moment. Work 1 full double crochet with brown. Start a 2nd double crochet with brown, but you're going to finish it with blue because that's the stitch before the color change. And there, that gives you 2 full stitches with brown, but you've switched now to blue. You're still carrying brown. You're going to work 9 double crochet in blue. So 8 full double crochet in blue. You're going to start the 9th one in blue, but you're going to finish it in brown. And I'll see you there. Starting my last or my 9th stitch in blue. And I'm only working the first part of it. I'm going to drop blue. I'm going to finish it with brown. And then I'm going to work the last 2 double crochet of the row. So a double crochet in brown, and then the last one, which is in the top of the chain 2, in brown. I'm just going to make sure I get both loops there. There we go. So the last 2 stitches of the row in brown. So we start the row with brown or color C, 2 double crochet color C, 9 double crochet color B, blue, 2 double crochet color C, 10 double crochet color B, blue, 2 double crochet color C, your brown, 9 double crochet color B, blue, and then we finish the row with 2 double crochet in color C or brown. So that's still 36 stitches altogether. And now you've established your fence posts. And if you had a lot of blue left over, you can sort of weave in a little bit and then trim whatever's left later. And then if you haven't cut your second length yet, maybe cut a little bit less. That way you know that you don't need as much as maybe you cut off. I always say, I try to err on the side of a little too much because it's easier than trying to tie in another bit of yarn later. And of course, if you have a lot left over, you can just put that little scrap back into your scrap heap. All right, we don't need any blue for this second row in our fence post. Chain 2, turn, and this is row 12. You're going to double crochet in the next stitch and double crochet in every single stitch all the way across, because row 12 and row 14 are solid brown. So there's no colors to carry. You're just working a double crochet in every stitch all the way across using the color brown or color C. And this is sort of the first, the long part of the fence. It's not the posts, it's the parts in between, which are the rails. That's it, the fence rails. So we're making our first set of fence rails. At the end of row 12, you'll still have 36 stitches. They'll all be color C or brown. You're going to chain 2, turn, and we're repeating row 11 all over again. We're going to start a double crochet in the next stitch with our brown. We're going to get our new length of blue. You don't have to tie it in with a knot. You can just loop it in like this, but if you're more comfortable using a slip knot just to make sure it doesn't go anywhere, that's okay too. Remember, you are working over top of the carried color, which is the brown in this case. You're going to double crochet into each of the next 8 completely, and then start your 9th double crochet with blue, and then finish it with brown. Work 2 in brown. But the second of those 2 stitches, you only work the first half in brown before you switch back to blue. Remember, every time you come up to the stitch just before the color change, you only work the first half of it in your current color. You finish it with the color you are changing to, and that's what gives you the correct color across the top and the correct color to set you up to do the new one. Start your 9th stitch in blue, pause, grab your carried color, you can give it a little bit of a tug to make sure it hasn't bunched up on you, finish it in brown, carrying blue, work a full stitch in brown, start the next stitch in brown, but finish it in blue. Drop your brown, but now you're carrying brown. You work 10 in blue, 2 in brown, 9 in blue, and finish the row with 2 in brown. Remember, before you completely change colors, you always work the first half of a stitch before the color change with the first color and switch halfway through to the new color. And that is what gets you the right color across the top of your stitches. When you get to the end of your last set of blue stitches, and there'll be 9 of them, you finish with brown. You drop blue. You don't have to carry that blue towards out to the other end. You just finish with last 2 stitches in brown. You'll still have 36 stitches. You've got definite fence posts and our first rail now. That's it for the cutting of little lengths of blue. You can worry about weaving those in later. I'll show you a bit of that in a bit. Chain 2, turn, and of course row 14 is a complete repeat of row 12. You're just going to double crochet in each stitch all the way across using brown. At the end of row 14, you should still have 36 stitches. It will be a row entirely in color C or brown, and it'll look identical to row 12, and rows 11 and 13 will be identical, as will row 15. Row 15 is an exact repeat of row 11 and row 13. So what you want to do is chain 2 with brown, turn, and just like we did before, start the second stitch of the row with brown. You're going to transition to blue. You do not need to cut your blue now. Now you can just sort of work with it because we are ending our use of brown at the end of this row, and we're just going to transition into all blue from here on out. So again, carrying your brown, you're going to work the first 9 stitches in blue, 8 of them completely in blue. The 9th one is where you transition to brown. 2 in brown, 10 in blue, 2 in brown, 9 in blue, 2 in brown to finish the row. I will catch up with you there. Just remember, as you're working across, since you've established 2 identical rows before it, you want to make sure that your blues and your browns start and stop exactly where they need to. So your brown posts are all completely lined up on top of each other, and your blue open sky in between your rails are also all lined up on top of each other. So you got a nice visual aid to use as you crochet. I'll see you at the end of the row. As you get across to the end of row 15, you're going to make your last stitch in blue, well, at least the first half of it. Finish it with brown. And unlike previous rows, you are going to carry your blue to the end. So do not drop blue. Work over top of it as you work the last 2 stitches in the row. Start the first half of the final stitch, stitch number 36, that second stitch in brown that's in the top of the chain 2. Work the first half. Switch to blue. You have 2 stitches to end the row in the right color. You can now snip your brown yarn. You don't need much tail. You can just weave it in later. Just let it hang there. And now it's all blue from here on out. Chain 2 with blue, color B. Turn your work, and for rows 16 to 24, double crochet in every single stitch across, including the top of the chain 2, turn, double crochet in every single stitch across. You'll still have 36 stitches at the end of every row. Rows 16 to 24, it's all blue and clear sky sailing. I have now finished all 24 of the rows in my canvas. So the first 10 are solid green. We have 5 rows where we're doing a little bit of graph work to create a bit of a fence, and then the rest of it is all blue, and that is that. It's time to move on to the border. I'm going to snip my yarn, fasten off, take a moment to weave in my tails, and then I'm just going to stitch on my border. I'm going to be using the wall hanging version like I have done in previous tutorials, and I'll spare you that in this tutorial. If you want to see that, we'll link to that in the description box down below. But if you're wondering how to weave in your tails, I recommend that you trim them so they don't have to be super, super long. At least I don't feel they have to be. If you're using a really slippery yarn, then maybe leave them a little bit longer so that when you're weaving them back and forth, they don't want to work their way back out. And then you want to focus on making sure that they stick or stay under the same colored stitches. And just like any other project, you're going to weave them in all the way, say under as many stitches as you can manage in one direction, like this, trying not to pull any of your current stitches out of alignment. I'm going to go all the way to the end here actually. And then double back over top of a stitch loop. So like this little guy here, I'm going to double back over 1/2 of that stitch and go back in the other direction. And I'm going to do the same thing for all those tails. I have completed my border. Again, we'll link to the original canvas design in the description box down below so you can add the border of your choice. And now the fun part, laying out all the appliques and deciding where they go. The really fun thing about laying out appliques is that you kind of get a feel for the space as you work in it. I have 2 different sized rabbits. I'm going to use my smaller rabbit just so he doesn't completely overwhelm the entire scene. And I think it looks like he's hiding in a little patch of daffodils. I may or may not use all of my eggs. I like the idea of him sort of creating a little Easter egg hunt on the lawn. And I've got a really cute little bird that I think looks perfect perched on top of the fence post. And I'm also going to include a couple of balloons, almost like there's a balloon, like a little bit of a party going on. And I'm going to stitch them so it looks like they're kind of tied to the top of the fence post, almost like there's a birthday party or an Easter party happening. And, you know, just to make sure you know which driveway to turn into, someone's attached a couple of balloons to the local fence post. So I think I'm going to start stitching things down. I'm going to start with my rabbit, since the rabbit is the main part. So the focus of this Easter kind of canvas, or this April canvas, is definitely my little rabbit. So I'm going to start by stitching him down. Then I'm going to come back, I'm going to stitch in the little daffodil garden around him like he's hiding in, and then I'll slowly work my way through the rest of the appliques. And as I go, I'll decide if I want more or less, and I'll keep you posted as I go. As always, I'm going to stitch these things down using the top facing loops of the canvas and the corresponding loop along the edge of the applique. So just to make sure that it doesn't move, you can pin it into place if you want to, but I find if you keep it flat on your work surface and just, you know, are careful with all of your little stitches, and then just pause every so often to make sure you haven't accidentally moved it, you'll be just fine, and you don't actually have to pin it down. But of course, whatever works for you is how you're gonna go about stitching down your appliques. But using the top facing loops is a great practice because it keeps all of the stitch work from showing through to the back. So you have a nice neat back. You have no stitches showing through on the back. So if you do look at the back, for whatever reason, you won't see any stitching showing through. So I'm going to work away at stitching down Monsieur Bunny here, and I'll see you in a minute. I'm just coming along to the other ear, and I've been sort of playing with it, and rather than having them both up in the air, I think one kind of folded over like he's sort of listening behind him perhaps. It looks really cute, and it gives a little bit more movement and character to this otherwise sort of flat applique. So I think I'm going to actually do that. I'm going to bend the ear a little bit, and I'm just going to stitch along the bottom edge of this ear. So rather than stitching through it, I'm just going to kind of grab the bottom edge, the loops along the bottom edge of that ear so that it kind of stays upright. And same thing, I'm still using the top facing loops of the canvas, but now I'm using sort of the bottom loops of that ear. And that will allow me to have it sort of fold over naturally without having to pin the whole thing down or sew the whole thing down. So now I'm going to continue sewing along the bottom edge down here, but I'm leaving this part free so that it'll just naturally curve on its own. And that will take me right up to where I started. So now there's a little bit of three-dimensional movement up here in addition to his little tail. And now that I'm done, I can just make a very tiny little knot at the side. I've got a couple more little stitches to add here, just to kind of Make sure the edge of the rabbit is all neatly stitched down. There we go. And an itty bitty little knot right at the edge here. And I've got plenty of sewing tail left over, which suits me fine. This little bit of yarn will go back into my stash, and I'll use it for some other tiny little bit. So simple little knot right at the end, right on the side of the applique. And now I'm going to take my needle, tuck it underneath, bring it out in the middle of the bunny applique. That hides the little knot in the tail, and then I can just weave this tail in back and forth just a handful of times. Not a whole lot. I know it's not going to unravel because I knotted the yarn. I just want to hide that little tail. And that should be enough. Don't pull too tightly. Be very careful when you trim. There we go. And there's our little rabbit, all stitched down and ready to get up to some mischief. Now that I've stitched down the rabbit, I'm going to continue to sort of layer the things I wanted to have around the rabbit. So it's very important when you're sewing down appliques in a project like this that you sew down the thing that is in the background first. So the thing that is furthest to the back, completely touching the canvas or the blanket or whatever you're stitching it to, that gets sewn down first. And then anything that sits on top of it, you sew that down in the order that they appear. So if you've got some overlapping, whatever is fully touching the back gets sewn down first. So I'm just going to fiddle a little bit with my 3 daffodils. I really want it to look like he's kind of hiding in a daffodil, little daffodil garden. But I'm still also considering sort of tucking in an egg, like he's hidden one down here at the bottom corner. I kind of like that. So I'm going to fiddle a little bit with this as well. Maybe he wants a carrot. Maybe there's a little carrot down here as well. Maybe that's why he was here. He was here looking for the carrot that's hiding amongst the daffodils. That's cute too. This is part of the process for me. I like to have all of the possible options sitting on the table, and as I stitch, it's almost like a little story is unfolding in front of me. Now I'm thinking I like the idea of having the little carrot down here at the bottom, in the bottom corner, because he was either snacking on it, brought it with him while he was, busy working on the Easter egg hunt, and maybe he's forgotten it because he hears something. And that's maybe why he's got one ear up and one ear down. I don't know. This is the story unfolding. I'll see where the stitches take me. I stitched my carrot down around the bottom edge, including some of the border loops as I went, because it's sort of almost spilling out of the actual picture. And I stitched only using the orange stitches, and I stitched along underneath the greenery. Once again, I have a nice little bit of a 3-dimensional thing going. And speaking of 3 dimensions, I don't want to stitch down the entirety of my petals on my daffodils. I really love that 3-dimensional feeling that the daffodil has. So I'm also going to have this daffodil leaning into the border, and I'm going to be stitching it down so that all of these little petals still set up. And it looks like this. I thread up my needle and I position it where I want, and then I look way underneath, pick up a loop way underneath, and I grab a loop underneath the edge of the petal where it connects to the inside center. So I'm stitching around deep underneath my flower. I'm not going around the edges. I'm going to be using the undersides, the underside of the stitches. So you get that first stitch in, make sure that it hasn't moved too much, and then you peel it back. You look for the next place. I'm going to be grabbing a piece of the rabbit now. Sometimes you want to just get that first stitch. There we go. And then a loop on the bottom edge of the petal, really close to the center of the flower. This will give it a lot of movement, but it'll still securely fasten it to your piece. So you can just grab a handful. You don't need to do every single stitch. I'm going to do another little anchoring stitch on the rabbit. And you see how that just, it keeps it down, but it still gives it some movement, and all of these little petals will stay up. Really like that. Really, really cute. So use this one right here, and this loop right here. There we go. Give it a little tug. Make sure that nothing's too loose. And this is not going to come up or come off of the blanket or the little canvas, but it definitely gives it that lovely little three-dimensional. So you still have this feeling of the flowers popping out of you, or popping out at you, I should say. And one more over here. You can grab a couple of loops. Now I'm back to using some stitch loops across the top of the canvas. Yes. Yep, love it. Once you get all the way around, or you feel like you've done enough stitching, I think I might just do a couple more here, just to get this little guy. That feels like it's enough. I'm going to do the same thing. I'm going to loop my thread or my yarn underneath the applique, make a tiny little tight as I can stitch without pulling any of my stitches out of alignment. Weave my tail in underneath a few of the stitches on the actual petal. This is very, very tiny. And then carefully trim the excess. I want to be careful that I don't accidentally get any stitches. And there we go. Another nice little three-dimensional feel. It keeps that definite daffodil look going, and I'm going to do the other two in exactly the same fashion. Those are my flowers on now. All three of them have a nice three-dimensional feel to it. There's his little tail popping out. So now he's definitely hiding in the daffodil patch, his little snacking carrot, forgotten as he concerns himself with the possible sounds of humans. I'm going to go and stitch down these two balloons now, and I'm going to make sure that they are sort of, one of them is almost floating up and out of the scene. I'm going to attach it to the front facing loops of a couple of these stitches to make sure that my rod can still go through the spaces. So I'm going to be very careful. I'm probably going to just use underneath here because I don't want to interfere with the spaces, but I want it to sort of look like it's floating up and off of the canvas. I'm going to stitch the other one down just below it, and I should have enough sewing yarn of each of them left over that I can make the little balloon lines so it looks like they're tied down here to the top of the fence post. But when I get to that point, I'll show you what I'm talking about. I've stitched all the way around my first balloon. I have it so that I haven't interfered with any of my spaces. I just sort of used the bottom of those stitches there, and I worked a little bit along the bottom edge or the underside of the balloon. But now I want to make it look like it's tied to the top of the fence post. So I'm going to take my yarn, and this is the same tail that I sewed it with. I'm going to just slip it underneath and run it, making sure that I don't come through on the other side. I'm going to run it all the way down to the bottom of my my balloon. Banana. Jayda clearly needs to stop for a snack. And then, without interrupting it, I'm going to just drag it down in a straight line and literally tie it to the top of my fence post. So I'm going to run my needle underneath the stitch on the top of the fence post. I'm going to do this once more in the same place, just so it kind of secures this. And then I'm going to do my best to tie a little bow. So I'm going to bring this under here. Now, bow tying I am not super great at, but I'm going to do that one where you make a couple of loops. So you take the yarn, make a couple loops, and then fold one loop under the other one like you're tying a little knot. Let's bring this down here, and then I'm going to do it, let's see, I might make this a little bit, just a little bit smaller. That's not so bad. I'm going to tie it a second time so that it doesn't want to undo, because I'm also kind of attaching. And then I want to have 2 strings, so that looks okay. I want to have 2 strings, so let's see if I can make that happen with this little guy. If I bring this up under here, make another loop, I will knot it at the back. I'll make a tiny little knot back here. And that will secure things. I'm going to trim this. So that's my 2 little bows. I want to trim. Is it going to look weird if so I'm going to snip that so that I've got my little bow, and I want to get rid of this. So let me see. Is this going to lie properly for me? Yeah, that'll look okay. That's not going to go anywhere. That's not going to go anywhere because I made that knot. I know what I'm going to do. I'm going to take this little tail, I'm going to weave it in underneath the same stitches that I attached the yarn to in the first place, and then I'm going to trim it. So I'm not too worried about it coming undone, but I just don't want that little feathery, fluffy bit showing. So let me just trim that very carefully. That will hide underneath the bow. And then there, I've got one little bow of it attached. I think that's kind of cute. I'm going to do exactly the same thing with the other one. So it's going to be a little bit busy there. I might trim these up, make them a little bit smaller. But yeah, that's cute. I do like the big floppy bow. I'm going to see about making the other one a little bit smaller. But again, a little more 3-dimension, and it really looks like that balloon is tied to the fence post. Okay. I stitched ahead. I added in my second balloon and tied it. I think I did a better job with the bow this time, but they're both tied to the top of the fence post, and I really like that. It looks like they're trying to sort of float away. I added a little blue bird to sort of sit on one of the other fence posts. I like this because it's small, so it looks more like it's in the background, but it also draws attention to the fact that it's sitting on top of something, and that is the fence, which is part of the background. And I only added a couple. I had several little Easter eggs, but I decided that I didn't want to completely clutter the bottom portion of the unblanket with Easter eggs. And just to make it a little more interesting, I used some of the scrap yarn from having trimmed off my little tails and did a little bit of simple embroidery on the 2 eggs that I did choose. If you want to know how to do basic or simple embroidery on some Easter eggs, that is part of our little Easter egg applique tutorial, and I'll link the tutorials for all of these appliques in the description box down below. I love all the colors and imagery associated with April. It's like somebody handing me a great big bowl of candy after I've been eating nothing but spinach for a whole week. That's what April's like after the winter here. It is still snowing out there as I record this, so until that stuff melts, I'm just gonna stare at this thing hanging on the wall and dream of pretty pastels and green grass and little flowers poking their heads out. Anytime, April, anytime. I hope you guys enjoyed stitching up the April unblanket along with us this week. Remember, you can share photos of your unblankets with us at the Etsy shop. Link in the description. Just click on Message Seller once you're there, and we love sharing your photos over on the Posts tab of our YouTube channel. I love the inspiration. I love what you guys come up with, and I know the rest of you like looking at those photos too, because I see the comments. I just love it. I love sharing these things with everybody because it's just this, it's amazing what you all come up with. April means something different for all of us. You know, there are common tropes, but then, you know, we're all living a different life. We're all living different lives in different parts of the world, and the months can be very different depending on where you are or what you're up to. So I can't wait to see what you guys come up with. Have a wonderful week. Stay safe, stay crafty, and we'll see you soon here on the Jayda and Stitches Show. Bye, guys.
Hi, everybody. Mr. InStitches here. Thank you for watching today. Here are some of our other videos you might be interested in. Oh, and don't forget to subscribe.